"Buy one, get one free," said the dealer. "The cowboy who bought two Apache sisters." The sun hung low over the dusty town of Redstone, painting the wooden buildings with an orange glow. It was late in the 1800s, and the frontier life was hard. Most people were farmers, traders, or cowboys trying to make a living in a world where danger and opportunity walked side by side. The town was small, with a few stores, a blacksmith, a saloon, and the sheriff's office. Horses tied to posts lined the streets, and children ran barefoot, laughing as they chased one another. Jack Harper rode into town on his horse, a tall brown stallion named Thunder. Jack was a cowboy, known in neighboring towns for his skill with horses and his courage, but also for his quiet, thoughtful nature. He had seen many hard things in his life: violent storms, bandits, and skirmishes with the Apache tribes. He was strong and experienced, but his heart was not cruel. Jack came to Redstone in search of work and a chance to rest after weeks of riding through wild lands. As he rode down the main street, the townspeople stared at him. A rugged man in worn clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, Jack looked like he had stories to tell. He tipped his hat to a woman sweeping outside the general store and nodded at a boy fixing a wagon wheel. He did not want trouble, only work and a warm meal. Jack stopped at the small general store. The wooden sign creaked in the wind, and the bell above the door jingled as he entered. The store smelled of dried herbs, leather, and the faint dust of the desert. Behind the counter, a man with a thick mustache greeted him with a nod. "Looking for supplies?" the shopkeeper asked. "Yes, sir," Jack replied. "I need food, some rope, and maybe a few other things for a long ride." As he gathered his items, Jack overheard a conversation near the back of the store. A traveling dealer, a man with a slick hat and shiny boots, was speaking to a small group of men in low voices. "Buy one, get one free," the dealer said, his voice smooth and almost cheerful. "Two girls, Apache sisters. Only for a good price." Jack froze for a moment. He did not understand what the man meant at first. He looked over and saw two young women sitting quietly on a bench in the back. Their clothes were simple, dusty and torn in places. Their eyes were dark and proud, filled with suspicion. Jack realized with a shock that they were the ones the dealer was speaking about. Something inside him stirred. He had heard stories of settlers and traders capturing native women and children, selling them for labor, or worse. It was not legal, and it was cruel. Yet here it was, happening in front of him. He felt anger rise, but also confusion. He did not want to ignore it, but he also did not know what he could do alone. The dealer noticed Jack's attention and smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "You interested?" Beautiful is asked. "They're smart girls. Can work, can cook. Or you can just take them for company. Buy one, get one free." Jack felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He looked at the girls again. They did not look scared in the way people expect. They looked wary, proud, as if they knew the world was unfair and had learned to survive. One of them, the older sister, Ayana, lifted her chin and stared at Jack with sharp eyes. The younger one naively whispered something, and the other one nodded. They seemed to communicate silently, carefully. Jack's mind raced. He could see two choices: ignore the situation and leave, or try to do something. He knew that walking away would be easier, safer. Most men would. But Jack was not like most men. He wanted to help, even if it meant putting himself at risk. He approached the dealer slowly.
"How much?" he asked, trying to sound calm.
The dealer named a price, high enough to make most people hesitate. Jack swallowed, thinking of the money he had saved. It was a lot, but he could pay it. If it meant the sisters could be safe with him, it was worth it. The dealer shrugged. "Your choice, cowboy. But remember, this offer won't last." "Buy one, get one free."
Jack nodded. He felt a mixture of dread and determination.
"I'll take them," he said. The sisters stiffened. Jack could feel their tension. They did not trust him yet, and they were right to be careful. The dealer laughed and handed over a few pieces of paper to make it official. Then he turned and left, leaving Jack with the two girls. The silence was heavy. Jack knelt down to their level and spoke softly. "My name is Jack Harper. I'm not like the others. I won't hurt you. I want to help you get back to safety." Ayana's eyes narrowed, studying him. She did not speak. Nayeli, the younger one, shook her head slightly. They had been told many lies by men before, promises broken as easily as the wind blew dust across the plains. They had to be careful. Jack understood. He did not force conversation. Instead, he offered them water from his canteen and some dried meat. They hesitated, then slowly accepted. Jack watched them closely, noticing small signs of trust, the way they unwrapped the meat, the way they drank from the canteen without spilling. It was not much, but it was a start. He spent the next hour with them, trying to show kindness without words. He pointed to the horse and the wagon he had rented, showing them they would have food, shelter, and safety for the journey ahead. Ayana and Nayeli exchanged glances. They were still cautious, but curiosity began to replace fear. Jack knew the journey would not be easy. Traveling through Apache territory or even the open plains was dangerous. Outlaws, bandits, and wild animals were everywhere. But he also knew that the sisters' lives could improve if he guided them carefully. He could teach them how to travel safely, how to find water and food, and how to stay out of trouble. By the time the sun had set, the town of Redstone was quiet. The streets were empty except for a few late travelers and the soft clopping of horses' hooves. Jack helped the sisters onto the wagon and settled them with blankets. He made a small fire nearby for warmth, and for the first time that evening, the sisters allowed themselves to relax slightly. As the stars began to fill the sky, Jack looked at the horizon. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. These girls were not just passengers. They were human beings with hopes, fears, and stories of their own. He promised himself that he would do everything he could to protect them, to return them to their family or community, and to make sure they knew they were respected. That night, under the vast sky, Jack, Ayana, and Nayeli sat silently by the fire. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the sounds of the plains. Jack thought about the journey ahead, about the dangers and the unknown, but he also felt a strange sense of purpose. This was more than a simple ride or a deal. It was a chance to do something right in a world that often felt unfair. The sisters began to relax a little more, though they kept their distance. Jack did not mind. Trust would come slowly, and he was prepared to wait. He knew that in the harsh frontier, courage and patience often mattered more than strength or skill. And so, under the stars and with the quiet of the desert around them, the three of them began a journey that would test their limits, challenge their beliefs, and teach them about courage, trust, and the meaning of doing the right thing in a world that could be cruel. The first step had been taken, and though none of them knew what awaited them, Jack Harper felt a determination that would not be easily broken. The first light of dawn painted the desert in soft shades of pink and gold. Jack Harper was already awake, tending to his horse, Thunder, while the sisters, Ayana and Nayeli, sat quietly by the fire, watching him. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. Jack could hear the faint sounds of distant birds, and for a moment the world seemed peaceful. Yet he knew the journey ahead would not be easy. He carefully packed the wagon, making sure blankets and food were secured. The sisters observed silently, still cautious, but their curiosity grew. Jack noticed how they watched his every move, their dark eyes sharp and attentive. He did not mind. He knew trust could not be forced. It had to grow slowly, like a sapling reaching toward the sun. "Are you hungry?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. The sisters nodded. Jack handed them some bread and dried meat. Ayana took a small bite, eyes still wary, while Nayeli ate quickly, almost like she was testing whether the food was safe. Jack smiled, letting them eat without speaking further. Silence could sometimes be as comforting as words. Once they were fed, Jack began to plan their route. He knew the territory well. There were rivers to cross, hills to climb, and stretches of desert where water was scarce. He decided to avoid the main trails where bandits often roamed and instead take smaller paths through valleys and forests. The journey would be slower, but safer. As the wagon rolled along the dusty trail, Jack noticed the sisters observing the land carefully. Ayana pointed to a distant ridge, whispering something to Nayeli. Jack did not understand the words, but he noticed their communication was silent, almost like a language of gestures. He admired their intelligence and resilience. Even in captivity, they had not lost their awareness or their pride. Jack tried to make conversation, but the sisters remained quiet. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," he said gently. "But I'll tell you about the land as we go. You might find it useful." Ayana finally spoke, her voice low and steady. "Why are you helping us?" Jack paused, thinking. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "No one should be forced to leave their home or family. I know I cannot fix everything, but I can make sure you're safe." The sisters exchanged glances. Nayeli's eyes softened slightly, though she still remained cautious. Jack sensed a tiny crack in the wall of mistrust they had built around themselves. He knew that every small act of kindness could matter more than words. The journey through the wilderness was challenging. The sun climbed higher, and the heat of the day made the desert feel like an oven. Jack led Thunder along a narrow path beside a dry riverbed. He kept the wagon slow, allowing the sisters to rest when needed. At times they would stop to collect small stones or plants, examining them with interest. Jack encouraged this, knowing that learning about the land could help them survive and grow stronger. One afternoon they came across a small stream, clear and cool. Jack stopped the wagon and helped the sisters down to the water. They drank eagerly, splashing their faces to cool off. For a moment, laughter broke the tension that had been between them. Nayeli dipped her hand in the water, watching the ripples dance across the surface. Jack smiled quietly, happy to see a glimpse of their personalities emerging. As the day wore on, Jack noticed signs that they were being watched. A set of tracks, partially hidden in the sand, showed that someone, or something, had passed nearby. He knew the land was not empty. Outlaws, hunters, and sometimes wild animals roamed these areas. He decided to make camp early, behind a group of rocks that offered natural protection. That evening, as Jack built a small fire, the sisters began to ask questions. Ayana wanted to know about the towns and people they would pass. Nayeli asked about the animals and plants they had seen along the way. Jack answered carefully, never overwhelming them, but giving enough information to help them understand their surroundings. The sisters listened intently, and for the first time, they seemed to relax in his presence. Jack could see that the sisters were not just survivors. They were teachers as well. Ayana noticed subtle signs in the land, a patch of edible berries, a hollow tree that could shelter them from rain. Nayeli had a sharp eye for danger, pointing out tracks or noises that Jack might have missed. He began to realize that while he was guiding them, they were also teaching him to see the world differently, through alertness and respect for nature. The nights were cold, and the fire was the center of warmth and safety. Jack and the sisters took turns keeping watch. He would sometimes tell stories of his life, not to boast, but to show them that the world was bigger than fear. He spoke of storms he had survived, horses he had trained, and friends he had lost. The sisters listened quietly, absorbing the lessons and understanding that Jack was not just a stranger. He was someone who could be trusted. One night, under a sky filled with stars, Nayeli finally spoke more openly. "Do you always help people you don't know?" she asked, her voice soft and curious. Jack smiled. "Not always," he said, "but when I can, I try. Life is hard enough without making it worse for others." Ayana stayed quiet but watched Jack carefully. Her trust was slower to form, but she was listening. Jack respected her silence. He knew that respect was sometimes more important than conversation. As days passed, the journey became routine, though never easy. Jack taught the sisters simple survival skills, how to find water in unexpected places, how to recognize safe plants, how to move quietly to avoid attention. In turn, the sisters shared their knowledge. Ayana showed him how to read subtle changes in the wind, and Nayeli demonstrated a way to spot tracks in soft sand. Together they became a team, learning from each other as they moved across the wild lands. One afternoon, a distant thunderstorm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds stretched across the sky, and the wind picked up, carrying dust and small branches. Jack quickly guided the wagon to a sheltered area near a rock formation. He helped the sister secure the blankets and food, and they huddled together as the first drops of rain fell. The storm raged for hours, but inside their small shelter they felt safe. Jack's calm presence reassured the sisters that they could face challenges without panic. After the storm passed, the land looked fresh and clean, and the sisters marveled at the changes. The rain had washed the dust from the rocks and leaves, and small streams of water trickled down the hills. Jack took a moment to enjoy the view, realizing that even in danger and hardship, there was beauty to be found. The sisters began to see this too. The journey continued, and Jack noticed the sisters becoming more comfortable with him. Ayana would ask questions about the towns ahead, and Nayeli would point out things in the landscape he might have missed. They began to laugh softly at small jokes he made, and Jack felt a warmth in his chest he had not felt in a long time. Trust was growing, slowly but surely. Jack also realized the importance of patience. He could not rush them or force them to speak or act. He could only offer safety, kindness, and respect, and hope that over time the walls they had built would come down. The journey was teaching him more than he had expected, not just about survival, but about human connection, empathy, and the strength found in understanding and cooperation.
As the sun set on another long day, Jack, Ayana, and Nayeli made camp near a small grove of trees.
The fire crackled and warmed them, and the sky was painted in shades of red and purple. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. Jack felt a quiet satisfaction. They had faced the desert, storms, and uncertainty together and were stronger for it. Jack Harper knew that many challenges still lay ahead, but for the first time, he felt a sense of hope. The sisters were no longer just passengers. They were companions, teachers, and friends. The bond they were forming could not be bought or sold. It was earned through trust, courage, and care. And for Jack, that was worth more than anything he had ever owned. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the plains, casting a golden glow across the landscape. Jack Harper was already awake, checking the wagon and his horse, Thunder. The sisters, Ayana and Nayeli, were stirring, rubbing their eyes and stretching after the long night. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine from a nearby grove. Jack could feel the day would be another long one, but he also knew that every step forward brought them closer to safety. Jack helped the sisters onto the wagon, making sure they were comfortable and had enough blankets. They moved cautiously, still wary, but more trusting than before. Nayeli even smiled briefly at him, a small sign of progress that warmed Jack's heart. He knew the journey would test them all, but he also believed that each challenge would help them grow stronger together. As they traveled through the rolling hills, Jack began to notice small signs of wildlife: rabbits darting through the grass, deer grazing near a stream, and birds circling above. He pointed these out to the sisters, explaining which animals were safe to approach and which to avoid. Ayana listened carefully, nodding, while Nayeli asked questions, eager to understand the land around them. Jack realized that the sisters were not only observing, they were learning, adapting, and quietly teaching him new ways to see the world. Midday brought intense heat, and the sun beat down on them relentlessly. Jack stopped the wagon near a small clump of trees for shade. He helped the sisters down, and they rested while he checked the supplies. He handed them water and some dried fruit, encouraging them to eat and hydrate. The sisters accepted, and for the first time they did so without hesitation, a sign that they were slowly growing comfortable with Jack's presence. While they rested, Jack decided to share a story from his past. He spoke of his childhood on a small ranch, the horses he had trained, and the lessons he had learned from his father about patience, courage, and respect for the land. He spoke softly, without embellishment, hoping to show the sisters that life could be both hard and honorable.
Ayana listened quietly, while Nayeli's eyes sparkled with curiosity.
For a moment the tension melted, replaced by a feeling of shared humanity. After resting, they continued their journey, moving along a narrow path that wound through hills and small valleys. The terrain was uneven, and Jack had to guide Thunder carefully to avoid loose rocks and hidden holes. The sisters held on tightly to the wagon, their expressions a mixture of caution and wonder. Jack could see that they were beginning to trust his guidance, but he also knew that trust could be fragile and easily broken. As the afternoon progressed, Jack noticed dark clouds forming on the horizon. He knew a storm was approaching. The wind picked up, carrying dust and debris, and he could hear distant rumbles of thunder. Jack decided to find shelter before the storm arrived. He spotted a small cave in the side of a hill and quickly guided the wagon toward it. The sisters followed, moving with quiet determination. Inside the cave, Jack arranged blankets and supplies to make a temporary shelter. The storm hit with full force, rain pounding on the rocks, lightning flashing across the sky, and wind howling through the entrance. The sisters sat close to Jack, listening to the storm and feeling safe under his protection. He stayed alert, watching the entrance for any signs of danger, but the cave provided a natural shield. As the storm raged outside, the sisters began to open up. Nayeli spoke softly about her memories of home, describing the small village where they had lived, the river they played near, and the fields where they had helped their family gather food. Ayana shared stories as well, though more cautiously, focusing on the lessons they had learned about survival and resilience. Jack listened with great care, understanding that these stories were more than memories. They were the foundation of their trust and connection. When the storm finally passed, the world outside was transformed. The rain had washed the dust from the rocks and trees, creating a fresh, clean landscape. Small streams ran down the hills, and birds cautiously returned to the branches. Jack helped the sisters out of the cave, letting them feel the cool, clean air on their faces. They marveled at the changes, their eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and awe. The journey continued into the evening, and Jack noticed subtle signs that they were not entirely alone. Faint tracks in the mud suggested that others had passed through recently, travelers, hunters, or perhaps bandits. Jack kept the wagon close to the trees, using the shadows to remain unseen. He explained to the sisters the importance of staying alert, teaching them how to watch for tracks, listen for unusual sounds, and recognize safe places to rest. The sisters absorbed every word, their expressions serious and focused. As night fell, Jack built a small fire in a sheltered clearing. The warmth and light were comforting, and the sisters gathered around, feeling safer than they had in days. Jack prepared a simple meal of dried meat, bread, and some berries they had collected along the way. They ate quietly, the silence punctuated only by the crackling fire. For the first time, the sisters seemed to relax completely, trusting that they were safe in Jack's care. After the meal, Jack suggested they keep watch in turns. He explained that even in safe places it was important to remain vigilant. The sisters agreed, understanding the necessity. Jack stayed awake for the first watch, feeling a sense of responsibility and connection that he had not expected. He watched the stars twinkle above, reflecting on how far they had come since the first day. The journey had already tested them, but it had also created bonds that could not be broken easily. The next morning brought new challenges. They reached a narrow canyon, the walls rising steeply on either side. The path was treacherous, with loose rocks and sudden drops. Jack guided Thunder carefully, making sure the wagon did not tip. The sisters clung to the sides, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. Jack spoke calmly, giving them instructions and encouragement. Slowly they made their way through, each step strengthening their trust in him and in their own abilities. During the journey, small moments of joy began to appear. Nayeli would point out interesting plants or animals, sharing her observations with Jack. Ayana would sometimes help steady the wagon or assist Jack with supplies. These small acts showed that they were becoming more confident, more willing to participate actively in their own safety and care. Jack felt proud, knowing that their resilience and intelligence were shining through despite the hardships they had endured. One evening, as they camped near a gentle stream, Jack noticed the sisters laughing softly together. It was a rare sound, full of life and hope. He realized that they were beginning to feel safe enough to express themselves freely. The bond between them was no longer just about survival. It was about companionship, trust, and shared experiences. Jack felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that his efforts were making a real difference in their lives. As the days passed, Jack also noticed the sisters' resourcefulness. Ayana could find edible plants and roots that Jack had overlooked, while Nayeli had an instinct for sensing danger, warning him of approaching animals or unstable terrain. Jack began to rely on them not only for company but also for their skills and insight. Together they were a team, learning from each other and facing the challenges of the wilderness with courage and determination. By the time they reached a small hill overlooking a wide valley, the sisters had changed. They walked with more confidence, spoke with greater ease, and trusted Jack more fully. The journey had transformed them, giving them a sense of agency and hope that they had not experienced before. Jack felt a quiet pride, knowing that his actions had helped them reclaim a sense of dignity and safety. As the sun set on the valley, casting long shadows across the land, Jack, Ayana, and Nayeli settled down for the night. The fire crackled, and the stars began to appear, one by one. They sat together, not speaking, but feeling the bond that had grown stronger with each challenge faced and each lesson learned. Jack knew that the journey ahead would still be difficult, but he also knew that they were ready to face it together. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of the valley below. Jack Harper woke before sunrise, as he always did, and checked on Thunder, making sure the horse had enough water and food. Ayana and Nayeli were stirring, rubbing their eyes and stretching after a restless night. They had grown stronger with each day, but the events of the journey had left them cautious. Jack could see it in their eyes. They were alert, watching him and the surroundings closely. After a quick breakfast of dried meat and bread, Jack helped the sisters into the wagon. They moved with practiced ease, a silent understanding forming among the three travelers. Jack guided them toward the valley floor, a wide expanse of grass and scattered trees. It was beautiful, but dangerous. The land was open, offering little cover from potential threats, and Jack remained vigilant. As they traveled, the sisters began to ask more questions about the world beyond the valley. Ayana wanted to know about the towns they would pass and the people who lived there. Nayeli asked about animals, plants, and how to find water in the wild. Jack answered carefully, teaching them what they needed to know without overwhelming them. He also shared some of his own experiences, hoping to show that even in a harsh world, people could survive with courage, patience, and respect for others. By midday, the sun was high and the heat became intense. Jack found a small grove of trees near a stream and decided to rest. He helped the sisters down from the wagon and they drank water eagerly, cooling themselves in the shade. Jack noticed that they were becoming more comfortable with the routine of travel. Nayeli even laughed softly when a small rabbit darted past him, startling Thunder, who shook his mane in surprise. "See?" Jack said with a grin. "Not everything in the wild wants to hurt us." The sisters smiled, a rare moment of joy. Jack knew that these small moments were important. They were building trust and confidence, not just in him, but in themselves. He watched them closely, seeing the spark of courage growing in their eyes. As the afternoon approached, Jack noticed signs that they were not alone. Tracks in the mud suggested that someone, or something, had passed nearby recently. He knew the land was often traveled by hunters or outlaws looking for easy targets. Jack decided to keep moving but remain cautious. He led the wagon along a path that wound through a small forest, providing cover and a chance to move without being easily seen. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the trees. A snapping branch, almost like a warning. Jack froze, signaling the sisters to stay quiet. Ayana and Nayeli immediately crouched low, their eyes scanning the forest. Jack reached for a sturdy branch he carried, using it as a makeshift staff. The sound came again, closer this time, and Jack realized they were being approached. From behind a tree emerged two men, rough-looking and armed with simple knives. Jack assessed them quickly. They did not appear highly trained, but they were dangerous enough if Jack was unprepared. He stepped in front of the sisters, positioning himself so they would be protected. "What are you doing here?" Jack asked calmly, trying to gauge their intentions. The men sneered. "We're just travelers," one said, but his eyes were suspicious and his tone was threatening. Jack did not lower his guard. He knew that in the wilderness, appearances could be deceiving. The second man moved closer, and Jack realized they were testing him. He kept his stance firm, showing that he would not be intimidated. The sisters watched silently, their fear mixed with curiosity. They had seen Jack face danger before, and now they were seeing his courage firsthand. Jack spoke firmly. "Leave now and you won't get hurt. Stay and you'll regret it." The men hesitated, realizing Jack was serious. He could see the fear in their eyes. Jack's calm confidence, combined with his size and presence, made them reconsider their approach. Slowly they stepped back, muttering under their breath before disappearing into the trees. Jack exhaled, relief washing over him. He turned to the sisters, who looked both impressed and frightened. "It's not always safe out here," he said gently. "But we have to keep moving." The sisters nodded. Nayeli asked quietly, "Will they come back?" Jack thought for a moment. "Possibly, but if we stay alert and stick together, we can handle whatever comes our way." The sisters realized that danger could appear unexpectedly, and Jack realized how much responsibility he carried. He was not just guiding them through the wilderness, he was protecting them from threats they could not yet understand. As the day wore on, the terrain became more challenging. The path narrowed, with steep hills on one side and a rocky drop on the other. Jack guided the wagon carefully, watching every step Thunder took. The sisters held on tightly, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. Jack encouraged them with calm words, reminding them to stay focused and trust his guidance. By late afternoon, they reached a small plateau overlooking a wide valley. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills, scattered trees, and a river glinting in the sunlight. Jack stopped the wagon, letting the sisters take in the sight. For a moment, they forgot the dangers of the journey, caught up in the beauty of the land. "This is why we keep going," Jack said softly. "Even when it's hard, there's always something worth seeing." The sisters nodded, absorbing the lesson. They had faced challenges before, but this view reminded them that the journey was not just about survival. It was about experiencing the world and learning to find hope in it. As evening approached, Jack found a sheltered area near a clump of trees to set up camp. He helped the sisters arrange blankets and supplies, making sure they were comfortable and safe. The night was calm, with a gentle breeze and the sound of the river nearby. Jack built a small fire, its warmth and light offering comfort. That night the sisters spoke more freely than before. Nayeli asked questions about the stars, the land, and Jack's past experiences. Ayana shared her thoughts about the journey, expressing both hope and caution. Jack listened carefully, answering their questions and sharing his knowledge without overwhelming them. They spoke quietly, the fire casting shadows that danced across the clearing. The conversation was a turning point. The sisters were no longer just passive passengers. They were active participants, learning and contributing to their own safety and understanding of the world. Jack felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that trust was growing and bonds were strengthening. As they settled to sleep, Jack reflected on the day's events. The encounter with the men had reminded him of the dangers that could appear unexpectedly, but it had also shown the sisters the importance of courage, awareness, and unity. They were learning not just to survive, but to face challenges with intelligence and strength. The next morning brought more obstacles. They had to cross a fast-moving stream, its water swollen from recent rains. Jack guided Thunder carefully, helping the sisters balance as they crossed. Ayana and Nayeli moved with more confidence this time, trusting Jack's guidance and their own growing abilities. On the other side, they discovered a narrow path, winding through a rocky hillside. Jack knew it would be difficult for the wagon, but it was safer than the open plains. He led the way slowly, carefully navigating each turn. The sisters helped where they could, steadying the wagon and keeping an eye on Thunder. Together they moved as a team, their trust in one another evident in every careful step. By late afternoon they reached a small clearing with soft grass and a few scattered trees. Jack decided to make camp early, knowing that nightfall could bring unexpected challenges. They settled in, the sisters helping to gather firewood and prepare a simple meal. The day had been long and exhausting, but it had also strengthened their bond. As they sat around the fire, Jack thought about the journey ahead. There were still many miles to travel, and the land was full of dangers and uncertainties. But he also knew that the sisters had grown stronger, braver, and more resourceful. They were no longer just dependent on him. They were partners, each contributing to their shared safety and well-being. The night passed quietly, the fire burning low as the stars filled the sky. Jack kept a careful watch, feeling a sense of pride and responsibility. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he also knew that they were ready to face them together. The journey had tested them, but it had also taught them about courage, trust, and the importance of standing together in the face of adversity. The morning sun rose slowly over the valley, painting the land in golden light. Jack Harper woke early, as always checking on Thunder and making sure the wagon was ready for the final stretch of their journey. Ayanna and Nayeli were awake too, stretching and brushing the dust from their clothes. There was a quiet sense of anticipation in the air. Jack could feel it. The end of their long journey was near. The sisters moved with confidence now. They had grown stronger, braver, and more trusting since the day Jack had first met them in that dusty town. They knew the wilderness better than when they started, and they had learned to rely on each other as well as on Jack. The bond between them had deepened over days of hardship, danger, and shared lessons. Jack helped them into the wagon, making sure they were comfortable. The trail ahead led through gentle hills and patches of forest, eventually opening up to a wider landscape. Jack had scouted the route in his mind during the journey. He knew that the Apache settlement where he hoped to return the sisters was near, though still hidden from the main trails. Their safety depended on caution and patience until they reached it. As they moved through the morning light, the sisters talked quietly among themselves. Ayanna shared her thoughts about the journey, recounting the lessons they had learned and the challenges they had faced. Nayeli listened attentively, adding her own observations about the land, the animals, and the small ways they had managed to survive. Jack smiled quietly, proud of how much they had grown. Midday brought a bright sun and warm air. Jack found a shaded area near a small stream and stopped for a break. The sisters eagerly drank water and refreshed themselves, and Jack helped them gather a few edible plants for the journey. They had learned to identify food safely, and Jack encouraged their independence while making sure they stayed safe. During the rest, Jack spoke to them about what awaited.
"When we reach the settlement," he said, "you will be safe.
There will be people who know you and can help you. You won't have to fear strangers or danger anymore." Ayanna's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and caution. "Will they accept us?" she asked softly. "They will," Jack assured her. "You are brave, smart, and strong. And you have each other. That is what matters most." Nayeli smiled, her confidence growing. "We can make it," she said. Jack nodded. The last leg of the journey would test them, but he knew they were ready. They set off again, the wagon moving steadily through the hills. The sisters noticed more details now. The sound of birds, the movement of the wind through the trees, the small trails that indicated safe paths. They were alert, observant, and careful, but they were also calm, no longer anxious as they had been at the beginning. Late in the afternoon, they encountered a shallow river with smooth stones forming a natural bridge. Jack guided Thunder carefully across, showing the sisters where to step and how to balance themselves. They followed his lead, moving with confidence. For a brief moment, the sisters laughed softly when Thunder slipped slightly, shaking the wagon gently. It was a light-hearted moment, a sign of relief and comfort that they were approaching safety. Once across, Jack led them through a small forest, the trees providing cover and a sense of calm. He knew the settlement was near. The sisters could feel it too, a mix of excitement and nervousness. They had never been so close to safety, and yet they remained alert, aware that the final stretch still required caution. As they emerged from the forest, they spotted the settlement in the distance, a small cluster of cabins, smoke rising from chimneys, and people moving about. Jack's heart lifted. This was what he had been hoping for, a place where the sisters would be welcomed, where they could find family and community, and where their journey would finally end. Jack guided the wagon carefully to the edge of the settlement. The sisters looked around, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and relief. People noticed them and came closer, curious but welcoming. Jack approached a man who appeared to be a leader of the settlement and explained their situation quietly, respectfully, and with honesty. The leader listened attentively, nodding. He turned to the sisters. "You are safe now," he said gently. "You have been brave to travel so far, and you will find a place here to rest, learn, and grow." Ayanna and Nayeli looked at each other, their expressions a mixture of relief, disbelief, and gratitude. They had survived the journey, learned the land, and trusted Jack enough to reach this moment. Now they were about to be welcomed into safety and community. Jack helped the sisters down from the wagon, and they walked slowly toward the cabins. They were greeted warmly by people who understood their journey and respected their courage. Jack stayed close, making sure they were truly welcomed, then stepped back, allowing them to connect with the community they had longed to reach. As the sun began to set, Jack found a quiet spot on a nearby hill, looking down at the settlement. He felt a mixture of pride, relief, and quiet sadness. The journey was over, but the experiences, lessons, and bond they had formed would remain with him forever. The sisters were safe, and Jack knew he had made a difference in their lives. He thought back to the first day in Redstone, to the dealer's words, and to the fear and mistrust in the sisters' eyes. So much had changed. Fear had been replaced by trust, hesitation by confidence, and loneliness by companionship. The journey had tested them all, but it had also transformed them. That night, the settlement settled into quiet. The firelight from cabins flickered in the distance, and Jack could hear laughter and voices, signs of life and community. He knew that Ayanna and Nayeli would be cared for, that they would grow stronger, and that their future was no longer uncertain. As he prepared to leave, the sisters approached him. Ayanna spoke first, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Nayeli nodded, smiling. "We will not forget you." Jack felt a lump in his throat, but smiled. "You don't have to," he said. "Just live well and stay strong. That is all I could hope for." They hugged briefly, a gesture of gratitude, trust, and closure. Jack watched as they walked toward the cabins, their heads held high, their steps confident and assured. For the first time since he had met them, they looked truly free. Jack turned back toward the trail, ready to continue his own journey. He knew that there were other people in need, other challenges to face, and other lessons to learn. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He had done what he set out to do: protect, guide, and help two brave young women find safety and hope. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Jack Harper rode away from the settlement, thunder's hooves soft against the earth. The journey had been long, difficult, and full of challenges, but it had also been rewarding in ways he could never have imagined. The sisters had taught him about resilience, courage, and the power of trust, just as he had guided them through danger and uncertainty. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the sound of distant laughter and the promise of new beginnings. Jack felt a sense of peace he had not known in a long time. The world was still wild, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous, but moments like these reminded him why he traveled, why he helped others, and why courage, kindness, and respect mattered more than anything else. As Jack disappeared into the horizon, leaving the settlement behind, he knew that the bond formed on this journey would remain in his heart forever. The journey of the cowboy who bought two Apache sisters had come to an end, but the lessons, memories, and hope would endure, reminding him, and anyone who heard their story, of the strength of trust, the value of courage, and the power of compassion.